We left the Skyline Drive, and still in the Shenandoah National Park, we entered the Blue Ridge Mountain Parkway, which was visibly different but equally beautiful. We had to become very aware of deer bolting across the parkway. There were many does and fawns. We stopped by the James River. George Washington was a surveyor before he was a military leader or president, and he was the first to talk about connecting the East Coast to the Midwest through canals. Railroads took over from canals very quickly, but not quickly enough to stop me from singing my childhood Erie Canal song over and over for Ernie's enjoyment. When we had broken camp that morning, Ernie and I both had what we assumed was food poisoning, so we decided to stay in a hotel that night rather than make and break camp for only one night in our stressed condition. What a fortunate turn of events. We stayed in the Peaks of Otter Lodge in Bedford, Virginia, adjacent to what was to have been our campsite. This lovely lodge with wonderful bar and restaurant is part of the National Park System. We spent relaxing hours in the evening watching Venus from our balcony. I had read A Walk in the Woods by Bill Bryson in preparation for this trip, and now I was reading Bryson's A Short History of Nearly Everything. I was in the section on the solar system. I'm familiar with astronomy and very familiar with photos of the Earth taken from space, but more than ever in my life, I had a sense of being on a rock moving through space in relation to another rock moving through space. We have named this other rock Venus. We met many people from New York City and New Jersey throughout this trip, and on our way to checkout the next morning, I talked to a relocated Mets fan, originally from Manhattan. We spent a long day of shopping for food in town and driving. We saw a sign for a Trump store, and also a bus with Trump and Melania painted on it. We saw a sign outside a church that said, Jesus Christ has a profit-sharing plan. Get it? Profit? P-R-O-P-H-E-T. We saw farms with cows and sometimes horses, Christmas tree nurseries, rolled up hay. Re-entering the Blue Ridge Parkway, we saw nothing but beauty. The parkway was lined with pink, white, fluffy rhododendrons, which grow like weeds here, and surrounded our next campsite, which was in North Carolina. We stayed 2 nights in the breathtaking Julian Price Memorial Campground and Park. The insurance CEO, Julian Price, bought the park for use by his employees, and his estate sold it to the Parks Department. The individual sites themselves were laid out closely together, but were landscaped very well for privacy, with designated level dirt platforms for tents. It was absolutely the most beautiful campsite either of us had ever seen. It wasn't run as efficiently as other national park campsites. A bathroom could be reached only through paths behind individual tents, and the bathroom was poorly cared for, with no lights or soap. On our first night, I got turned around in the dark and couldn't even find the way back to our tent, much less the bathroom. 3 sets of nearby campers had joined forces in a loud, drunken-sounding party that continued hours after the national park 10 p.m. noise cut off, with a large blazing fire. I didn't know how to read the situation, and I was scared. I finally announced myself after I heard them commenting on my wandering back and forth on the road with my little light, and they were actually very nice, lighting my way to the bathroom. 2 of the men got in a loud fight around 3 a.m., and one packed up his tent and his family, including small children, and left, yelling, car doors slamming. We visited the Highland Games on Grandfather Mountain the next day. About 90% of Appalachian settlers in the 18th and 19th centuries were descendants of Ulster Protestants, whose ancestors had migrated to Northern Ireland from the Scottish-English borderlands. The best book I've ever found explaining some of the regional differences in the United States is called Albion Seed by David Hackett Fischer. The deeper we got into this part of the country, there was predictably less ethnic diversity, but it was still sporadically present and was present at the games. The Highland Games in North Carolina is great fun, with dance, music, and sports competitions, sheepdog displays, concerts, and endless booths with endless clans, each clan possessing a history, a map of territory, many surnames, a plaid, and a crest. One colorful guy told me his clan left Scotland because they had become Quakers and felt out of place. After every conversation with a representative of a clan, I was invited to become an honorary member. The games felt like one huge family reunion. On the way back to camp, we stopped by the Linville Falls. Beautiful, but everything here is beautiful. That night, in the stunning campgrounds, was peaceful. We broke camp and continued a long last drive on the Blue Ridge Parkway to Smoky Mountain National Park, stopping to climb Black Mountain's Mount Mitchell along the way. Mount Mitchell is the highest point east of the Mississippi. We entered the Smoky Mountain National Park from North Carolina, and this was the end of the Blue Ridge Mountain Parkway. The Smoky Mountains really look smoky, especially in the morning. The collective vapor of trees and other vegetation creates a constant blanket of fog. We drove through the Newfound Pass, which is a low gap in the mountains, providing easy access between North Carolina and Tennessee. We stayed in the part of Smoky Mountain National Park that is located in Tennessee. It was Ernie's grandmother's favorite place to drive and visit, and Ernie traveled with her as a little boy. The conversations and campsites around us were intelligent and lively. People got up early for hikes and multiple destinations. Unsupervised children rode bikes safely on the extensive roads. And some neighboring adorable little boys got endless pleasure from the hammock their parents had hung between trees. On one pass by their campsite, one boy, wearing special rainbow glasses and swinging, of course, in the hammock, said to Ernie, "Dude, do you know I'm seeing rainbows?" Bears were a serious issue in this area, and one bear had to be scared off and relocated during our stay. The friendly rangers who greeted us at the road with gentle jokes in the morning after we'd made late camp without checking in were married, retired in Florida, and were working as volunteers. It is free to visit and stay in this camp, which makes it more accessible to families for vacation. The accents and manner of many people led me to think they might live in the vicinity. The park is very well run, and it is the most visited of all the national parks. Our destination the first morning in Smoky Mountain National Park was Cades Cove, a valley that was home to European settlers arriving in the early 1800s. The settlers made it through the first winter with help from the Cherokee. Cades Cove was an example of a viable, even thriving, small community in Appalachia. With a population never more than 700, it eventually sustained trade and 3 churches. The colonies in what became the southern United States were an extension of the dying European feudal system, with large land grants given to aristocratic families from the south of England. These feudal underpinnings evolved into a plantation system. At the outset, only white men could vote in the United States. Well into the 19th century, the only white men who could vote were those who owned land. But the southern states were a different animal, since so much land was concentrated in the hands of so few people. Maryland, with its original large land grants, remained in the Union only because Abraham Lincoln locked up the legislature so that they couldn't vote to secede. Appalachia stood apart from the southern hierarchical feudal economy. The original Baptist church in Cades Cove had to stop meeting during the Civil War because it was not safe for the congregants, who unanimously opposed secession. The Methodist church had to stop worshiping because their sympathies were split down the middle. Human enslavement was legal throughout both southern states and northern states, and it was finally abolished in New York in 1827. One of the largest human auction sites anywhere was on Wall Street, where commodities were traded. It makes me crazy when my New York friends think of the abomination of human slavery confined to the South. Large-scale investment in commodities finally caught up with Appalachia after the onset of the Industrial Revolution. The land in Appalachia had been able to sustain small-scale livelihoods until logging interests and then coal mining interests gained possession of large tracts of land and dispossessed the people who lived there. The federal government allowed and even encouraged these large corporate land acquisitions. The logging industry and then the coal industry denuded much of the land and made it unlivable, creating economies based on one commodity and one employer. For a population originating largely on the border of Scotland and England, and left largely to their own devices after the Romans withdrew around the 4th century, government was not to be trusted. And now? The cohesive aspects of communal life were clan and religion. During our visit to one of the 3 churches in the cove, a small group of visitors recorded hymns in the good acoustics.